Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where every year we review every single Best Picture nominee, and we are back. Another year has come and gone. The year is 2024. It is time for us to tackle this year's new crop of 10 Best Picture nominees. We are going to be giving an in-depth review to each and every single one of them, as well as placing them on a classic Backlot Banter ranked list. We're going to try to figure out which one we think is the very best, and then we'll reflect on that, and then see what the Academy picks. Will they line up? Will they not? We'll see. We haven't been super right in years past, but it's always been fun.
Well, we've always picked the best ones.
Yeah, they've been wrong.
They've been wrong.
The Academy
Want
is
to
wrong
be clear about that.
Yeah.
far more often than we are. That's part of why we like doing it. Today, of course, we're going to be discussing Yorgos Lanthimos' brand new film, Poor Things, one of the 10 films nominated for Best Picture. You know, I want to talk about this film. Let's get into it. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We talked about on the normal show last episode. If you're interested in things not Best Picture, we're talking about
like 40s French cinema.
Yeah, we are going to put the main show on pause. The main show of reviewing the Palme d'Or winners, because we've already done every single Best Picture winner.
Yes,
that's right.
And there's a playlist where you can go watch all of them and see where they fall on the ranked list.
That's down in
95.
There's
Soon to be
96.
96.
Soon to be 96. Ooh, can't wait for that.
True fact, also, if you start the first episode of Quest for the Bestest right now, the last episode will end as they're announcing Best Picture.
Really?
That's
Wow.
Real. That's true. That's true.
So get watching. Well,
We don't have 6 weeks of video.
we have approximately what? That'd be like 4 days worth
Probably
of
4
days worth of
days.
stuff. Yeah.
Well, last time in the Palme d'Or land, we talked about Antoine and Antoinette. It got a 6.1, and so it's at place number 8. No, place number 9 on our list.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So go watch that video.
Enough of that.
Enough of that.
It's Oscars time, baby.
It's Oscars time. After the featured comment from Abram.
Okay.
A word from our sponsors.
Yes. It's actually not a word from our sponsor this week. It's a word from our dungeon master, Abby.
Oh, yeah.
Hey.
Who is our real life DM for our new D&D game, and
Uh-huh.
also left a comment on our Antoine and Antoinette review saying the following: I did fall asleep watching Antoine and Antoinette tonight. Maybe more of a me thing than a movie thing, but I'll finish it eventually. I just know Antoine is going to fumble Antoinette hard, though. Shut up and enjoy your leaks. Can't handle a real it girl SMH.
So true.
That's true.
Abby, thank you very much.
Thank you for the
that.
comment,
Thank you
Abby.
very much.
Great comment.
Yes.
Well, if you are a new viewer to our channel, and we know there's many of you, make sure to write something down, your thoughts on Poor Things in the comments. Do you agree with what we're about to say? Do you think we're completely wrong, coming at it from the wrong angle? We've got the wrong predictions. Or are we the most genius film reviewers on this here earth? Let us know what
Probably
you
that
think.
second one.
Yeah, I'm leaning into the second one.
Okay.
Timo?
Well, let's begin talking about this film.
I'll
Poor Things. Who wants
Yeah.
to give a little synopsis of what happens in the movie?
I want Abram to give a synopsis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sure, I can give a plot synopsis.
Yeah.
It's not
Okay.
particularly complicated.
No, not very. We have a man. His name is Godwin Baxter.
That's right.
And by the way, already good sign that I remember character names.
Yeah.
That's good.
Oh,
This is
It's
good.
pretty,
That's a
pretty
quest.
memorable character names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Godwin Baxter finds the body of a woman named Victoria.
Right.
This woman, Victoria, had just committed suicide by jumping off of a bridge, and her body is found by Godwin, who is a kind of mad scientist, kind of a traditional surgeon, who decides to...
Kind of a mad scientist, kind of a happy scientist. He has a range of emotions.
There are many things about him.
He decides to take Victoria's body, cut the still alive infant out of her stomach, and put that infant's brain...
Mostly uterus.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. That's a whole different conversation.
We'll talk about that off camera.
And puts the infant's brain into Victoria's head, and thus we have the birth of this mother and daughter, but all around new person, Bella Baxter.
That's right.
And Poor Things follows Bella
Shout out.
Baxter on sort of a globe-trotting journey
as the physical body of a woman who's probably in her 30s,
She's probably around the age of Emma Stone, real life actress.
is carrying around the mind of an infant that is very, very quickly developing and coming to understand the world. So as we go around Europe, as we stop in various countries, as we end up on a cruise ship, as we meet a colorful cast of characters, Bella Baxter has to kind of come to understand the world and her place within it, and then finally kill her old husband, the husband of Victoria, and thus end the film and kind of complete her journey into adulthood, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happened to me before I was 21.
Yeah. So there we go. That's the best I can do.
No,
Yeah,
that was
that's
phenomenal.
pretty good.
I think I did okay.
You mixed Max McCandles, you mixed Duncan Wedderburn, but they were implied by colorful cast.
Yeah, we'll get to them.
Yes.
I didn't remember their names, so I said colorful cast of characters.
Shall we get into thoughts on the film? And may I start?
3, 2, 1. Okay.
Okay.
Now
we
Now you may.
I immediately loved Poor Things the first time I watched it. It was one of the first films that I watched at the beginning of the new year. I had a triple feature day at the film at the theater and ended it with Poor Things and was just enraptured by this film. I had seen a couple Lanthimos films before, but this one just really got to me. It really grabbed me, and I think it is his best work. I think it is one of the best films of the year, in a year where there are many great films, many of which were nominated for Best Picture. And I think Poor Things is such a uniquely rich and fun film. It is packed with comedy, a different type of comedy than in Lanthimos' other work, I would say.
It's definitely funnier.
It's definitely more of a romp, and so for that reason, I uniquely really enjoyed it. But that's not to say that it's not without its thematic value, its artistic value, its political viewpoints and socio-political viewpoints, all of which I'm excited to talk about here. But I mean, the real champion of this film is Emma Stone, who delivers us one of the most unique and interesting and enthralling characters in recent movie history in Bella Baxter.
Second to Lydia Tarr.
And of course, second to Lydia Tarr. And just fully commits herself to the aesthetics and the feelings and moods of this world by sort of placing us in the shoes of someone who is experiencing it all for the first time. Really fun movie. Love this film.
Okay, I'll go down the line. I'll go next. I agree with everything you said, and I think the reason why this is not only my favorite movie of last year, which it beat out Elemental, which is going to be hard. It was going to be a hard task, but it did. Not only one of my favorite movies last year, but one of my favorite movies of all time is because it does everything that I want out of film. And you can go back and visit other episodes of movies that we've reviewed that I've loved, things like Everything Everywhere All at Once and Shape of Water. These movies that take the fantastical, that take the ridiculous, ground it with human emotion and theme, and pump it, just inject it with a shot of art, heroin art in every vein. I think this is gonna be one of the most quest movies we can ever watch. I mean, there is no single facet of this movie where you couldn't talk about it for an hour. You're like, okay, I want to talk about the cinematography or the production design or the score or all the performances or the costume design or the lighting or the color grading or the themes or the script or the jokes. It's like it's the complete package. I mean, I think this is one of the most impactful, interesting, thought-provoking, visually stunning, engaging movies I've ever seen in my life. I absolutely adore it. And 10 out of 10. Oh, wait. Oh, that's for the end of the episode.
That's for the ending episode. Come on, Tucker. Come on.
Sorry, it's my first time.
Yeah. Abram or Timo, who would like to go?
Abram, you gave the
We're going on the line.
I'll go. You're going on the line. Abram, you're next.
Okay.
So technically on screen, if we're going to the line, it would have been Abram, me, Tanner, Timo.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I don't like Poor Things. I can look at Poor Things and really appreciate everything you guys are saying. I think that what I end up taking away from it most strongly in terms of positive feelings on the film is I think that it is just such a bold movie.
Oh, absolutely.
In that it immediately drops you into a world that has its own logic, both like internally on a plot level, but also on like a filmic structural level.
Sure.
We're immediately affronted by these massive and continuous fisheye shots and these big interesting title cards and sort of macabre imagery right off the bat. I mean, there's really no onboarding into Poor Things. And I think that that's really commendable. But for me, I just don't like it. And and I think it's important for me to frame it that way because I want to be clear that I think a lot of my feeling on the film is subjective. It reminds me a lot of when I saw my only other Yorgos Lanthimos film, which is Killing of a Sacred Deer, the movie, one of the films that stuck with me the most, even though I watched that when I was probably 15.
Sure.
But also a movie I really don't like. I think that Yorgos has a very, very, if you can believe it, strong creative vision, and it's executed on here. But I just found the film to be overly long. I found it to be quite tedious. I found a lot of the humor to be one note. I thought that Bella Baxter is an interesting concept, and I think that Emma Stone gives one of the most embodied performances I've ever seen. But I think it's one that, for me, doesn't change enough to where I feel like the entire 2 hours, 20 minutes of scenarios is really building for me. I feel like we're in stasis for a lot of the runtime, tonally, in terms of sort of the character ideas, in terms of the humor and everything. So I just found myself quite restless throughout it. I understand why it has all the nominees it has and why you guys love it, but I just did not work for me.
Okay, that's fair. Timo.
I am in the other camp. I like this movie. This movie I thought was very
Welcome
good.
aboard, buddy.
Yeah, very, very enjoyable film to watch. Pretty much on all levels. It's a visual feast. There is unending beautiful shots, one after another, and then it starts with this very stark black and white footage that makes you really, I think, sets the tone and has meaning. We'll get into. I think there's pretty much meaning to be derived out of every creative choice that Lanthimos makes in this film. It's a very you can never argue that a Lanthimos movie isn't directed. These movies are tour theory in a capsule. And I really enjoy it. I like from this movie that it is much funnier than other Lanthimos movies. It seems to be much more approachable. It's gross and effed up, but in a way that's like I can watch it. There are others.
It's kind of lighthearted with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like when she's stabbing the guy in the eyeball and picking up the penis, and it's like, yeah, that's just goofy. It's just Bella being Bella. You know?
It's goofy. I think that the kind of the human psychology of this film is where I'm perhaps most interested in seeing this unique circumstance, someone being put in another person's body or in their older body, a child in the body of a normal, developed adult.
Go watch Big.
Yeah. The way that initial scenario like plays out is seen throughout the film, and I feel like is in a natural and while not, this isn't a normal thing, it makes sense in the film and the ways that
the internal logic is definitely there.
And
we see the scientific documents that Godwin Baxter drew up. Like, those aren't fake.
No.
It's
You can
real
recreate
science.
those. I believe.
So I find there to be many, many elements of this film that I'm really enjoying. Some of it I do struggle to gain some meaning from. There are elements that are
that's what Quest is for, baby.
Yeah, but on the whole, I enjoyed it quite a lot.
Okay. Before we get started, we like to frame these by just going through the nominations that it got. And Poor Things was nominated for 11 Oscars at the Academy Awards. Second most.
Behind
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer had 13. Poor Things had 11. Those include Best Picture, if you can't believe it. But also makeup and hairstyling, original score, directing for Yorgos Lanthimos, actress in a leading role for Emma Stone.
Really, that one too.
That one too.
Actor in a supporting role for Mark Ruffalo.
Actor in a supporting role for Mark Ruffalo. Adapted screenplay written by Tony McNamara. Cinematography, film editing, production design, and costume design.
So close to everything.
Close to everything. Yeah. Got a lot.
No shorts.
No. So where do we want to start here, gentlemen?
I just have a quick question. This is an aside. What's the most nominations a movie could have? Do you know?
Possible?
I believe.
Well, The Bar is currently Everything Everywhere All at Once, which got the most Oscar nominations in history.
At what?
More than this?
Well, no,
I don't remember.
I believe it was. I think La La Land is up there because that was before the sound split.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. But it's like 16 or something like that.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm just curious.
But so it's close, but it's not like because this didn't get every tech.
Yeah. Should we start with Emma Stone?
I think so.
Talk about Bella Baxter here.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of where the entry point to this film I think is in this honestly quite incredible, quite transformative performance from Emma Stone. One in which I still see Emma Stone, but I also see Bella Baxter quite strongly. This is a performance that is not, it's not our normal person going through normal person things. Emma Stone really
No, she's quirky. She's different from other
embodies
girls.
this quirked up, toddler person
Yeah.
quite well.
Quirked up white baby.
You can't say that, white baby. But no, I mean, obviously in my opening thoughts, I really singled out Emma Stone because, I mean, this is her film. She is Poor Things. She is Bella Baxter. And like I said, I think she is one of the most fascinating film characters and perhaps one of the most committed portrayals to a character that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In the lead up to this film being released, there was, some apprehension, some worry from people reading the plot synopsis, essentially, because this is based on a book, of like, okay, so it's a woman with the mind of a toddler, and she sort of goes on this sex-filled adventure. I'm not sure. I know this seems weird. How is Emma Stone gonna do this? And the way she goes about it is just committing 100% to the material. I mean, she has really become a very interesting actress at this stage in her career and has become somewhat of a muse for Yorgos Lanthimos, I think, too. She's been in a number of projects with him and has a number of projects in development with him coming up. That's not to mention her roles in, like, The Curse with Nathan Fielder, too. She's not afraid to take on this very like dark and off the beaten path sort of comedy for someone who started out, as pretty straight down the line, like teen comedic actress.
Yeah.
And she's like sort of just gone with the flow of how like these ideas of modern comedy have ebbed and flowed and gone into interesting pathways. And Bella Baxter is perhaps one of the most iconic depictions of that, I think, where she is this comic character who's like, she's a fully grown woman who has to like discover sex and, societal norms and everything with the mind of a toddler. And Abram, I know you said that the comedy can feel one note, but I think that Emma Stone just has this ability to keep it fresh. I think that comes from the script as well.
Yeah.
And I've heard a number of people, especially our friends who've gone to see the film, sort of say that it's a little long because I think this film sits at like 2 hours.
It's
and
2 hours 20.
Yeah, something like that.
Credits.
But for me, Emma just carries me through the entire thing because I think she does develop, and the character of Bella Baxter does develop in such a fascinating way, where you can see her from scene to scene, learning new things, adjusting to things, and sort of not becoming normal. I think is the most interesting thing. Is that Bella Baxter becomes
becoming herself.
Yeah, becoming herself. She becomes an entirely unique person, I think as Godwin Baxter sort of says, like, you're not you, but you're not your child either. You're your own person. And she becomes eventually someone who was removed from societal norms, even though they were being attempted to be like drilled into her over the course of this film. So I just find that super fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, this is a performance that is built for range. The range of ostensibly an entire human life, which we very rarely get to see. And because it's portrayed through enhanced development, she's learning and progressing quicker than a normal person. This is not a movie that takes place over the course of 50 years, and that's how we get to see it in a person's entire life. It's over the course of a year and a half or something like that. And so I really find that it gets the best of both worlds for me. I mean, this film feels very cohesive. The scenes flow from one to the other. But we still do get to see what it's like to grow and learn and experience things for the first time. And that's all through the performance that I said is built on variety and range. Because when I saw this movie the first time, one of my biggest issues with it is that I was watching Emma Stone's performance as she was like barely developed Bella Baxter. And I'm like, she's going too far with it. I'm not really sold on this. But I feel like once you get to know Bella through the rest of the movie, and then for me on a subsequent rewatch, the context of watching her go from barely be able to walk and barely be able to speak to being someone that is thinking about philosophy and religion and science and sociology it makes me think about myself and the way that I think about things and the way that other people learn about things and like human history. Like everything is pulled into this one performance because it's just about that range. It's about that development. And Emma Stone, I think, embodies that throughout because she's committed to the idea that she doesn't know yet. So many performances, I think, you can watch and tell that this actor understands this character so well because they've read the script back to end and they know what's coming and they really have embodied this character. But the idea that she's playing an infant and she doesn't know anything yet leaves like a mind empty unexpectedness to the performance where you don't know what she's gonna do next, and that's because that's how life works. And like the commitment to that and how it ties into the themes and everything, I just found like, especially in the second watch, oh no, there was a lot of thought put into this. Obviously, even when she is going crazy and it's going a little bit far in the first part, it's like there's reasons for that. And when you look at the way she interacts with people, and there's reasons for everything. I just thought I think that's fantastic.
Fantastic acting.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Fantastic.
I'm kind of on two minds of Bella.
Okay.
And one I would like some help with, but what I know,
Baby brain, adult woman brain.
what I know for sure is that Emma Stone.
Go watch The Man with Two Brains.
Emma Stone, I think, is in a really complicated position with this role because it's not, and this is so fucking weird, I'm gonna say this. There's a movie called Chappie.
Okay, here we go.
And
we're bringing up all the hits here. Man with Two Brains, Chappie,
Big.
You watch the robot Chappie go from a sort of a toddler in mannerism and development to a full-grown robot that fights other robots.
Yeah, or like Short Circuit, maybe.
Emma Stone is in this position where if Chappie is hitting the beats that a child hits and then an adolescent hits and then a teen hits and an adult hits, that's not really what Bella Baxter does.
Right.
I mean, Bella Baxter pretty quickly is going out on her own. It's more that she's almost going through a sort of ideological awakening in a lot of ways. And a lot of what Bella
there's another kind of awakening that's happening too, I'd say.
Yes.
Yeah, and a sexual one too. Thank you very much.
We don't talk about that here on Quest, though.
No.
And I
don't
think,
offend.
and I think that when it's about sex and philosophy, but not about like a little, it's not the emotions of, oh, I'm a little toddler, I'm afraid of the world or whatever. It's sort of a different progression to adulthood than you would expect.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a lot more challenging to pull off than pretending to be a toddler who's crying because you're lost in a city. That's not the character that Bella Baxter is.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a confidence that Emma Stone embodies from the first scene to the last. It's just that confidence is sort of clarified, I think, for the character of Bella throughout. And I think that that's cool. And I think that Emma Stone does give one of just the best performances ever.
Yeah.
But I don't...
Second mind.
I don't take anything away from Poor Things.
Okay.
And I don't really... I'll give you an example, which is probably me reading the movie too reductively, which is where I want you guys to come in.
Okay.
When she sees all of the people who are enslaved, where they're in Greece,
Alexandria.
they're in Alexandria, and there's this big hyper dramatic moment when she realizes that like poverty exists.
Cruelty against widespread human cruelty exists.
It's an exaggeration of the meme of just found out that racism exists.
Exactly.
And so obviously this is a feminist work, and I think that the feminist text of the Poor Things is clearer and something I'd like to get more into.
Of course.
But I just don't really take much. I don't find that I as you do, Tucker, inquire about like the world or my development or history or society or anything. I see Bella Baxter as this character that comes to learn that like polite society is lame and there's problems in the world. And I know that that's reductive.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what you guys see that takes it deeper than that. Because for me, Poor Things doesn't go deeper than that in my mind.
Sure. Timo?
Yeah, I think that part of the journey that I am interested in this film is that personal journey, and ultimately is the sexual journey of Bella Baxter. There's like, I mean, this is like a trailer line, right? They use this in the trailer, but she's like, why don't people do this all the time? And that change, I think, is evinced in the cinematography. We switch from black and white to color.
What word did you just use? Evinced?
Evinced.
I've never heard that word before. That's a new one for me.
I'm pulling out the $2 words.
He's got it.
He's
got it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the Well, because I think it has to deal with the end of the film. The film basically sets us up for this question about Bella Baxter, given that we kind of know her backstory at the start. We know that
Yeah.
she's a Frankenstein monster-esque creature. We know, or creation. She's a person, not a creature. We know that there is some sort of previous life to her, that her body was in a previous situation. And so when the film then decides to answer this question with the introduction of the old husband that comes back and tries to basically force and remold Bella into her
Victoria.
old Victoria, her old self,
Mhm.
the film that comes down on Bella being a new and free and independent person who is, unlike the Victorian society, like sexually liberated and sexually free to do as she chooses, and thus that's why she chooses to kill her old husband, or to put a pig's brain or whatever that she puts in his mind.
Goat.
It's
Go,
good.
goat.
Please, Sam. Please team up. Please team up.
Pigs don't bleat, and the general very clearly bleats
Yes.
as one of the last shots of the film.
Yes. I think that might be the last line of dialogue in the film. Yes.
No, but I think you're totally right, Timo. And I think when I want to think about the themes of Poor Things, the reason that I find it so fascinating is because, much like Everything Everywhere was last year, I find it to be a confluence of like everything humanity has to offer. It's
Yeah.
taking bits and pieces from everywhere. And I want to get into how different sections of the film talk about different aspects of humanity.
Mhm.
There's a section about philosophy, there's a section about sexuality, there's a section about science. But for me, the central theme through Bella Baxter and connecting everything else is that you aren't defined by the places you came from.
Yeah.
It isn't about your past. It's about who you can develop to be in the future. And so watching Bella come to terms with each element of human society, even if it is through on the nose scenes like I just found out poverty exists, man.
Yeah.
It is forcing a person to reconcile with each of these things that unlocks a new part of your mind to be more confident in who you are and what you can do going forward, that I think pushes
And
the film entire through.
what your beliefs and what your ideology is as a
Yes,
person.
yeah.
Well, yeah. To build on what Tucker had just said there is that, like, yeah, I find the central sort of tenet of Poor Things to be that, sort of I comment upon, a very common debate, which is the nature versus nurture thing.
Yes,
Is
yes.
that like human behaviors like kindness, for example, I believe Poor Things is sort of emphasizes that those are learned behaviors. They are not, innate. And I think that, that's why we see Bella experience so many different types of people and living situations and situations alone. Is that she does have to learn that. And going back to the writing of Bella Baxter and the scenarios that she's placed in, I always find it interesting that she is never necessarily, she's never scared or apprehensive. She was always of a growth mindset, as my high school chemistry teacher might say. She's always of the mindset of she's very curious. She wants to learn about things, and she wants to make herself or other things better.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately it's a very hopeful film, and that's
Totally.
not something that Yorgos Lanthimos
Usually
often
does.
makes, especially in Abrams' experience with killing of a sacred deer.
Dogtooth, the
Yeah, yeah.
lobster.
Those are all very nihilistic films, and
Very
he
bleak, yeah.
really does a 180 here with Poor Things, and how he, sort of. I mean, maybe it's because this is adapted from a different material too. This
Sure.
is not sprung from the twisted mind of Yorgos Lanthimos. But
He
yeah,
definitely has a twisted mind. If I saw that show up in a trailer, I wouldn't be like, nah.
this is not a Matthew Vaughn situation. But no, yeah, I always thought that was quite interesting with the conception of Bella as a character.
Mhm. Let's
No, I think-
toss in, unless Abram, you have something. I was going to say, let's add in some of the side characters because they are
Yeah.
very important in explaining more about Bella. I'm beginning, of course, with Mark Ruffalo's character. What's his name again? Oh, I just had the IMDb up.
Duncan Wedderburn.
Oh, that's right. Oh, Duncan.
God, great character name.
Uh-huh.
I mean, for me, Duncan is the standout performance of the film.
Sure,
which I
yes.
know is ridiculous because, as we're saying, Emma Stone gives a completely
Like an all-timer.
a transformative one. But I think what Mark Ruffalo does is he sort of sneaks in around the edges
Yes.
to be this character whose descent towards literally being in an asylum is always just right below the surface.
People have drawn many comparisons between Barbie and this film, both in theme, but I think also in like the lead female character and the clown supporting male character.
Yeah. I think it's really fun, and especially because I'm used to seeing Mark Ruffalo very restrained.
Of course.
In the case of the canon of this, a movie like Spotlight, where it's obviously a complete
completely different
like this. And I think what's great about the side characters, Timo, to loop them in and loop in what I was saying, is I think you guys are awakening to me what I might see as kind of the deepest that I feel like Poor Things goes, which is this like emancipatory idea.
Yeah.
And I think it's emancipatory in a couple ways in terms of like reclaiming bodily autonomy. I think is pretty obviously what this movie is about, in my opinion. Which is why I think that this is like a feminist text is most effective for me.
For sure.
But I think you can probably make a similar argument to like intellectual freedom if we take emancipation in that way.
Yeah.
And I think that it becomes evidenced by characters like Duncan, which we see Bella continually subvert, which is again where I think this movie is unique in that it's not like Duncan Ida. Sorry, I just got my Dune 2 ticket.
That's true. We got Dune on the brain.
I do. Duncan Wedderburn. It's not like, and it would be weird if he's like a father figure because he's fucking her about every 2 minutes of screen time. But it's not like she's sneaking out from his house, right?
Yeah.
She is constantly freeing herself from different types of people. But I do think that this does invite part of my criticism about the film and the character of Bella is that I think because she is basically always just curious, it leads, in my opinion, to a lot of the interactions being flattened. I feel like Bella treats Duncan the same way she even treats Christopher Abbott's character, to an extent, the same way that she treats the woman who runs the brothel in France. Yeah. I think that Bella Baxter is maybe, in my opinion, too unchanging. Obviously, it's about development. So it's hard. It feels antithetical for me to call her unchanging, but I do think her attitudes towards people are, and I feel like,
well,
go ahead.
I would say that is intentional, and I would even go so far as to say that's a good thing because again, she has no reason to be like, she has no priors to be like, I should treat this person differently. She's just like, they all sort of come to her as like, oh, this is a new person. I don't like, and she even comments upon it later with Duncan. Is like, why'd you stay with him for so long? It's like, I always thought it'd be better. Like she has just this hopeful mindset that comes from the naivety. But is ultimately, I think, sort of conducive to moving the plot in the story in interesting directions.
It's naivety initially, but I think the truth then becomes that's just Bella's personality.
Yeah.
She is a curious person. And the reason why I think I understand why it would be a criticism of her being definitely unchanging in terms of she doesn't have a huge variety of the way she approaches people is true of what Tanner said that's just like her baseline, the way that she approaches people. But I think it also is important to do that to heighten the reality of this movie, to heighten the performance, because this movie is intentionally unrealistic. Yeah. And the reason it feels off is because we know, as people that have been developed in the world and been around plenty of people and gone plenty of places, that we've been building these kind of memories and social cues and
judgments of people, of certain types of people,
across our entire lives. And what we're watching is a person that has been entirely divorced from that. And so I think it would be unrealistic to ask her to invoke the kinds of things that we expect to see out of a character like this. And a reason why I think that's good, but I think it doesn't necessarily go as far as you were saying, is she does learn from her mistakes, and she does learn from different aspects of what people have brought to her in terms of learning from Godwin of certain elements of how someone can be caring, but also have a dark past, but that's okay, and I can recognize with that, or how that maybe someone can take advantage of you through Duncan Wedderburn, and like learning to be a little more wary about that as she is entering the brothel section of the movie, and then applying all of that when she's spending the time with the general, because she's learned from Max McCandles and Duncan Wedderburn and Godwin Baxter what to approach. Like, she's definitely adapting and changing across the course of the film, but she's very committed to her personality. And I think that is very important for the thematic value that Poor Things, in its ridiculous nature, commits to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with what you guys are saying, and I understand why it makes sense. But to make my criticism as simple as I can be, I think it becomes boring.
Sure.
Okay.
On an audience level.
Yeah.
Because I just find myself, I find myself feeling like everything happening around Bella is so much more interesting than Bella.
Sure.
And whether she's supposed to be a way in for me or not, where I'm supposed to go, oh, this is an interesting scenario or not, I feel like it ends up feeling quite flat. Whereas I don't, as a viewer, because Bella, I do feel it from audience perspective is fairly nonchalant towards the general. Like I don't feel a sense of heightened stakes here. Maybe it's because I was checked out already by that point in the movie, which is very subjective and possible. But I just feel like you're right that Bella's unchanging nature is for her character. But I think that the lack of sort of tension I feel in situations where I feel like there should be more leads me to just watching Poor Things as a series of interesting vignettes.
Sure.
And a series of fortunate events.
Sure.
Yes.
I just find, and maybe I can't quite put my finger on my criticism of it.
Yeah, that's fine.
And maybe it is not Bella in particular, but I just don't find Bella to be this revelatory character in her writing.
The interesting
that I feel
thing
like other people do.
is she kind of almost becomes the conversational straight man because you know what to expect out of her. And so it's watching her be placed into scenarios with normal people and people with different personalities. That is where I think the variety comes in. The reason why I don't find ecstatic is because this movie shifts on a dime constantly. And I want to get into one of my favorite elements of the structure of this film is that within each chapter and each location that she visits, the themes, content, characters, set design, all of it completely shifts. The first section of the film being about that development. Of course, we don't quite know Bella yet. She hasn't developed. So we're looking at her through the eyes of not only Goblin Baxter, but primarily Max McCandles as he's getting used to the situation. And then when Duncan is entered into the picture and they go off to Lisbon, that section is about exploration and discovery. And she's talking about the explorer side of her and discovering sex for the first time, but not quite understanding it. And then there's the boat. And the boat is about philosophy and a greater sense of the world.
Intellectual person.
Intellectual. So it's science and then exploration and then philosophy and then more politics and self-confidence in the brothel section. And then by the end of the film, all of these things are brought together.
Complete realization of a person.
Yeah.
Like it does really build upon itself very neatly. Like
even when each section is pretty self-contained in terms of this is the section about philosophy. This is the section about
science. We get a
science.
title card essentially. But, title card is the location. But I think that's a great observation is how it sort of does. It is obviously vignette-like Abram said, but each of the vignettes serves a specific purpose. And I was just never bored with that, I would say.
To me, I wasn't really bored either because I quickly identified my angle on the visual style of the film. Was like, well, we're seeing this through a toddler's eyes. We are seeing that's how I'm going to logicize this fantastical stuff that we're seeing.
Yeah. No, Timo, that's just what Portugal looks like, right?
Yeah.
Timo,
you should know that. I mean, you've been there a couple of times.
Yeah. So I loved those environments because in Lisbon, that was a fantastic scene. I mean, it kind of looks like Portugal, but take the dial of imagination and turn it up to 12. Make the streetcars flying. Make the buildings and these tiny little alleys, which they do exist. It does kind of look like. I think that the production design of this film really sets it apart in a visual feast because there are so many, like you guys are saying with the thematic material, there are so many different locations that are displayed so differently. The House of Godwin is this very
God damn.
Godwin.
Sorry, Godwin.
It's this Mary Shelley-esque, where you get these hardcore Frankenstein monsters vibes.
It has connections to Frankenstein?
We'll ponder that.
Yeah,
that's for the next Quest episode.
Yeah.
The way that it shifts and the way that I think you guys are saying how the film's thematics shift section to section reflecting on Bella's mentality. I think that the visuals shift section to section, reflecting on her mentality. In Paris at the brothel, that scene is much more, that whole section is a lot more subdued. There aren't fantastical
Yeah.
elements. The weather is gray and it's seemingly cold outside. The brothel, while it is like a busy and a colorful location in the maximalist way, like this film pretty much is all the time, it isn't as fantastical and in an almost exploratory sense like Lisbon is,
Yeah.
or
The only like
Egypt
weird
is.
touch is like the trees are red for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But other than that, you could find
Yeah.
architecture like
What
that.
is, what's everyone's favorite or preferred, I guess, visual setting of the film? Because mine is the ship / Alexandria.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
You wanna
I-
expound?
Yeah, expound.
I mean, I think
mine
it-
is Lisbon. I think Lisbon is
Yeah,
my
sure.
favorite.
I mean, they're all obviously fantastic in such a visual feast and are shot in such interesting ways that like nothing else really is. I think that it's also singular in how the entire film looks, but the ship I think just has such richness to it.
Hmm.
And of course Lisbon does too, but I think it also makes full use. And if I may bring in some outside films again here as well, this film notably used the volume for its visual effects.
That's
I was
why-
gonna make jokes about that last night while we
Yeah.
were watching the movie. Like, oh, there's ships in the volume. It is.
It is literally the volume.
literally
the volume.
Or at least, a volume adjacent sort of technology. The volume, for people who are unfamiliar, is a technology pioneered by, I think, ILM.
It is because it's for the Mandalorian.
Because
Yeah.
it was
Sorry.
It's just ours.
Do you mean that this was literally on the volume? Is that what you're saying?
or a volume adjacent
Sure.
technology.
Yeah.
It's the
This
same
technology
concept.
has gotten exported to the fact that I have shot on an LED wall volume space in Austin. It's a
Mhm.
pretty
Sure.
Yeah,
common
it's basically
thing.
just they use a giant LED screen as a background, and then sort of, depending on the quality of the film, set dress in front of that.
as opposed
Um,
to green screening, which is what
Exactly.
you would do previously before this technology.
Yes. And I think it makes such compelling use of that in like this sky that almost looks like some sort of like nebula behind them instead of any
It's so
sky
beautiful,
that
man.
it has ever existed on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like the design of the ship and the wide shots is so fascinating.
It's yellow green smoke coming out of these giant
Exactly,
smokestacks.
and
What the heck is that?
got like a giant
It looks-
bulbous
it
sort
looks
of
like
like
a
glass
children's
viewing chamber
drawing.
on it.
It looks like how
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would invent a ship if I were to scribble on crayon.
Yeah.
Scribble with some
And
crayons.
it's got bubbles coming out of it, and there's
Mhm.
funny guys on the ship, and the smokestack's yellow.
Yeah.
And
But even like you get to the hotel in Alexandria, and it's this like this sort of like domineering yellow to it, and it's built out of like this like limestone. Once we do a wide shot, and the stairs are crumbling, you're like, this is a wide shot that they used once.
and you access it by riding in a little floating streetcar that has wheels on it, even though it never touches the ground.
Exactly. There is just so many elements to the world of Poor Things that feel so interesting. And of course, it sort of takes on the aesthetics, I guess you can say, of like a Victorian era England,
Yeah.
and that's a similar time frame in areas that were being colonized by England at that time. And it makes use of that in thematic ways as well. But it has so much fun with it, with making the colors pop so much. Instead of dressing our characters in like drab and dreary grays and browns, they're wearing light blues and like pastel yellows and pinks and everything.
Mhm.
It's so rich and colorful, and so I sort of like talked about it in the roundabout sense, but that's why I find the ship sequence and the Alexandria sequence to be the most visually interesting for me personally.
I'm gonna be shitty and give a non-answer.
Okay, here we go.
What I love most are the little weird things.
Oh,
Okay,
totally,
yeah.
totally.
That's what sells the movie for me.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, I think a
Godwin's
lot of
burp.
That's
Yes.
actually what I was gonna say. That's gonna be one of my examples. I think that stuff is really cool, and that's to me what brings it to life.
Mhm.
Because the ship is really great for the reasons you said. But in some ways, I also feel I've got a microphone problem. I apologize to the audience.
He drifts
No, I
a
was
little
thinking,
bit.
if you're
drift a
looking
lot.
this way, I'll move the mic
Yeah.
That's a
to
good
reflect
point.
that.
I always fuck up the microphone.
It's our first time, folks.
Plus 2 hours of editing for moi.
Uh-huh.
I find that a lot of the really crazy bombastic stuff is cool, but I kind of get lost in it because there's so much of it.
Totally.
There's so many ridiculous vistas
Okay,
and
yeah.
sunsets and big ocean waves and everything. I'm like, okay, cool, there's another one.
Uh-huh.
But it's when you punctuate a scene with a peculiar thing, like in Lisbon, it's not, for me, it's not the color palette or anything. It's the big, like a monorail car
Yep,
in
yep,
the
yep.
background.
Yeah.
Or or it's the burp, or it's a duck body with a pig head on it.
Yes.
To me, those are the details that make this, in my opinion, some of the strongest production design we've ever seen. Of course, not as strong as Blade Runner, the best production design ever.
Okay, yeah.
But I do think that to me is why Poor Things is remarkable. I think it's
Totally.
I think it's easy to put the ship in the vault. Easy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I can't make
This is a
Yeah.
Fox Searchlight film, so they have access to the Disney the volume.
Yeah.
So
Maybe it was that.
Do you think that Dave Filoni was there on set?
I think he came on. I think he walked on set and he's like he didn't understand anybody. He's like creative
Where's
direction.
Grogu? Where's Grogu?
So hang on. So are these like references? Do people know these things?
But that's my answer. It's the small
Sure.
details.
Yeah,
for me
yeah.
that sell Poor
I mean, well,
Things.
the reason Poor Thing's so bad is because there's no Easter egg.
That's true. That's true.
But I agree with both of you, and I'm going to meet in the middle and say it's the consistency of both the maximalist and the minimalist in terms of no, that's not what I was looking for. The big and the small. Let's go with the simple words.
Yeah.
That makes this film so compelling, and I think the place where, and I'm surprised to be saying this, but the place where those meet, for me the best is in the house and laboratory of Goblin Baxter.
Yeah.
Where watching the trailer, I'm like, oh, I'm going to love Paris and I'm going to love Lisbon. Those are going to be like the crazy,
big
inventive,
ones.
colorful locations that are really going to like glue my eyes. But we spend so much time in the house of the house of Baxter, the house of God, if you will.
Yeah, true.
Where my eyes are darting around constantly and the camera's in such weird places that it allows your eyes to drink in so many different things.
Yeah,
And I think my favorite small detail in this movie that I have heard no one reference is the fact that the ceilings in Goblin Baxter's house they're plaster. They're ceiling material. I don't fucking know what you make a ceiling out of. But they're wavy like a blanket hanging from the ceiling in loose waves, or a blanket being laid on a bed. So
Didn't even notice
there's
that.
these curves and waves, and they mold into the sides of the walls that are these like stark, incredibly tall walls that have paintings baked into the molding. And so everywhere you look, it's not a normal ceiling. It's not a normal wall. There's it's crumbling in an interesting way.
A little different.
It's a little quirked up.
Yeah.
And then the chairs are these massive tall things with like super stark lines, and everything in that house, I think I've never seen anything like it. There's this wall with plates. What the fuck is that? you go in the garden and then there's a little pig dog thing walking by. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And I just love how dense that location is. But for me, it feels realistic in the way of this is just the world that this has created. Godwin Baxter, a guy whose face has been sliced and diced and looks like a baked ham on the outside. He would live in a house like this, and he would create these weird half-assed creatures, and like it feels so cohesive because it isn't just the commitment to the big; it's also the commitment to small, and it's the meeting of the two that makes this like maybe top 5 production design of all time. For
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
gentlemen, go ahead, Timo.
what was I gonna say? I don't know. I forgot. I mean, I
Oh,
will
sorry.
say,
Go
I
ahead.
will say, I am becoming a LED wall hater. I think the LED wall in this film looks pretty good, in terms of LED walls, but it's like I can just tell immediately
too.
that it's an LED wall, and I appreciate it for the artistic links that it allows the film to go to, but the inventiveness of it was not up there in terms of where you can really use an LED wall well is where you put mostly your physical set. You have like a room or a wall of a room and then a large window, and in the window you see the LED wall, but it's kind of actually covered up by everything else. Instead, in Poor Things, they're walking on the deck of the ship, so we have the railing, and then it's just the LED wall in the background. And so that's
Oh, sure.
it's
Yeah,
not
I get
like the most interesting thing ever, but I'm noticing it because I like have worked on an LED wall and I know how the sausage is made, and so it's like, okay.
Yeah, same with Abram. That's not true.
No, I just make books.
Yeah. I just play video games.
I mean,
I have a question.
I will. You know, we didn't really
Okay, here we go.
talk very much about Godwin. Willem Dafoe, another
Yeah.
excellent performance. Another,
so good. Man.
like, oh my god, makeup and hairstyling, excellent.
Yeah.
Galore.
The costumes.
Done by Abram's girlfriend's friend's father.
Really?
Yes.
Very interesting.
This is true.
We don't know the guy.
Friend of
we
the
don't
friend
even
of
we
the-
don't even
yeah.
know the friend.
Hang on, let's see if I can. Let me.
We all-
Let me pull
We
up
know
name.
the father's daughter's friend's boyfriend.
of the show.
And then
it was it either Mark Coulier or Josh Weston?
I'm sure it was. Tanner.
It is one of them,
we do.
yes.
I think we deserve a special. We ought to make a special shout out for a friend of the show, Ramy Youssef.
Oh, that's
yeah,
actually true.
because our friend-
Yes.
Our friend Al Naz in the Discord, join with
Yes,
the link in the
yes.
description, is
Mhm.
actually
Al,
friends.
I'm sorry, I
with-
totally forgot about that.
Mhm.
No, yeah, Ramy Youssef is very interesting in this movie because Max McCandles is the only normal person you meet for this entire
Yeah,
movie,
He's like the most normal guy.
and not that he is doing things that I've done or
Sure.
shares a worldview that I share.
I've seen
Uh-huh.
some things you've done.
A couple, handful. Won't point any fingers.
Gone to school.
Gun school?
Gone to school.
Oh, gone to school. I did do that.
Yeah.
Um, But in that, I love Max McCandles as a character and Ramy Youssef's performance because he's the actual straight man of walking into the situation and wanting to respect his like professor slash like
mentor,
like guy he
father
looks up to.
figure. Yeah.
God figure.
Not father figure.
God figure.
Yeah, Gother figure. And then being like, what the hell? Well, that was weird. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. And reacting in ways that, unlike literally everyone else in the film, you could see an actual human being reacting in the ways that Max McCandle does. And he thinks through things and he's like, oh, that's not right. You shouldn't say that. And it feels he's really the in for the first part of the movie because Bella hasn't formed her personality yet. But it's through the eyes of Max McCandles that we get introduced to the world of Godwin Baxter and Godwin and Bella Baxter. And I think that's a really, really smart choice. Because if you did not have someone who is mostly relatable, giving a like very earnest and genuine performance, which I think Ramy Youssef does a phenomenal job. He's got a great little twirly mustache. That team, I wish you'd styled your mustache like this for the view. I don't think the movie would have worked as much because it's so overwhelming at the beginning, as you were talking about, that without Max coming into it and having to learn about everything. I feel your mind would be reeling. But Ramy Youssef plays a really critical role in this
Absolutely.
movie. And he's just overlooked, I think.
I often do, because he's not as showy as someone like Willem Dafoe or Mark Ruffalo,
Yeah.
but he does get to deliver one of the many funny lines in this film that I wrote down, which is, Bella, cease working yourself.
Gosh.
But no, like, because I kind of want to talk about him and giving special attention to him so we don't overlook him because he is a friend of the show.
Yeah.
And
that's why we love the movie.
Exactly.
Even though I saw the movie before.
Exactly.
Separation. 2 steps only.
And Duncan Weatherburn in the same way, Weatherburn, in sort of a similar conversation, because I think they both serve a particular feminist theme of this film. And here we go. I'm a straight white guy. Gonna talk about some feminism here. Everyone, get your notebooks out.
Hillary got us excited to do this.
That's true. That's true.
It's her fault.
Many people have noted upon. Many, especially
Really lucky that Poor Things came out after Barbie, where feminism was invented.
That's true. Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing. Many women who have reviewed and talked about this film have noted upon how this film subverts a common trope, especially a sci-fi trope. This is a sci-fi film after all. That I don't know if you guys are familiar with, often referred to as Born Sexy Yesterday. Often, best symbol.
I didn't know that was in the Bourne trilogy.
Yes. That's good.
I thought
Legacy, supremacy.
Sexy yesterday?
But, often emblemized by Leela from The Fifth Element.
Leela and Stitch.
Yes. The female character who is, sort of new to the world, often created in some fantastical way.
Or maybe
and the male,
Bride of Frankenstein?
Exactly. The male character gets to like guide her, shape her, mold her, and also, in a sexual sense, be like, he's the best at sex that she's ever had because she's the only person that she's ever had sex
Duncan
with.
Wedderburn.
Exactly. And how this film sort of immediately subverts that when Max McCandles meets Bella, and has this delivery of like, oh my God, she's beautiful. And then we hard cut to...
Well, he says a word we're not going to say. Here,
exactly. But he's enamored with her, and that, in this way that many sci-fi leading men are when we have a female character that falls into this trope. And then we cut to Bella Baxter, and she pisses herself, and she pisses on the floor.
Wee!
Exactly. Wee! And so we are, like, from the word go, sort of subverting this trend. And then when we get to Duncan Weatherburn, he's talking about, you've just been thrice fucked by the very best.
Such a great line.
And he is sort of playing into the bravado. He's like, I'm the best at sex in the world, because he knows that this woman has been, for all he knows, like locked up basically her entire life.
Yeah.
And has not had, much sexual experience, and why he gets so, he's driven to madness essentially by her sexual exploration outside of his own limited view and his control. So yeah, I just wanted to note upon that it's a brilliant subversion of this very common trope that many people were worried that it would fall into from, just reading the plot synopsis, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's also pretty cool because we're in this weird, especially in the States, this weird like societally regressive moment where body count
That's right.
it has somehow become a sign of a woman's worth.
Yeah.
And unfortunately a lot of now like popular social media discourse. And so I think that this film is a really good rejection of basically any misogynist or anti-feminist talking point that is sort of swirling around, particularly in U.S. culture, although I'm positive it's elsewhere in the world, but I'm from America and still in it at the moment. So I agree with you. And I think that again, the meta narrative of just bodily autonomy is good. If you can believe it.
It is good. It is good to have bodily autonomy for everybody.
I think that Poor Things works well because it is both incredibly unsubtle in its feminism, but also incredibly subtle in the more like ideological or like literary ways that you're talking about.
We are our own means of production is a line that I particularly love.
It's better than the Barbie line.
Yeah.
I feel like I like Barbie. Let's just be clear.
Yeah. No, I was making a joke about people that think Barbie's the first.
Listen, there's a lot of discourse going on right now. If this becomes some sort of time capsule, there's a lot of discourse going on with how Barbie got nominations or didn't get nominations in certain places. But yeah,
we're talking about Poor Things.
Okay.
Yeah, I do want to mention one of the reasons why I find this film so compelling, that it is a subversion of the tropes of mad scientist and Frankenstein's monster and these things that we've seen done so many different times. But for me, it is the commitment to, frankly, the elements that I find the most interesting about them that completely sells this movie for me. Already at the idea of, okay, mad scientist, baby brain, woman body, yada, yada, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll watch that. But when I watch this movie and I see the first section of the movie that is about social development and the development of the brain and how Bella is learning different words each day and how Goblin Baxter has tried different things and has this history of what formed him into being a mad scientist with his father. It paints the bare bones elements of the Frankenstein story in a much more believable and well thought through light.
Yeah.
And then watching the development of the monster, which is one of my favorite elements of any of these stories, through Bella Baxter, and how she is so much more. She delves into so many more topics and ideas of the human experience than any other Frankenstein's monster style creation has ever been given the space to work with. The fact that she is learning about sexuality and learning about philosophy and we're watching this all through the lens of watching someone socially develop. It is kind of like the ultimate realization of where I feel that these stories have always been hinting but never committed to. And so just watching it be analytical and scientific and developmental and sociological, I'm like, you're speaking to me. And it's goofy. And there's a mad scientist burping bubbles and there's a weird duck guy in the background. I'm like, you can't do any better than this.
I'm curious because we talked a lot about this film philosophy. There's a section of film philosophy. And I'm sorry if this is going back in time. But what do you guys think this film has to say about philosophy?
Just that it's interesting to discuss. And I think that why...
Okay.
Yeah.
Abram,
yeah.
I don't know what this film says about philosophy. I don't remember what this film says about philosophy. I watched it a bit longer ago than you guys did because of my own schedule. But out of all the things that stuck with me about this film, the philosophical elements didn't at all. I kind of don't remember what their conversations were. I'm thinking that there was some elements of like socialism in it too, like they name dropping socialism
in the brothel section. Yes,
Yeah.
Well, where does I do think that it doesn't really. It kind of is like explaining it. It explains some philosophy, but
Mhm.
what does it leave me with it? I don't know. I
Sure.
don't actually. It's like, out of all these other things, I remember plenty of other elements of the film, but this is not one that stuck with me.
I mean, I think it is, and as simple as it is to say, I think it is kind of what Tucker had mentioned, and it's. I think that idea is still delivered in a beautiful way, if not simplistic way. When Bella says, I wrote the line down, but it's after when she's speaking to Gerard Carmichael's character, the cynic as he's known, and he says, "Hang on," or she says rather. Ideas are banging about in Bella's head and heart like lights in a storm. Beautiful line. Love that line.
Mhm.
And essentially what that says is that, like, Bella has now been opened up to an entirely different way of viewing the world through philosophical lenses, and she's been hooked, essentially. And so, yes, while it is maybe so hilariously simple to say, the movie stance on philosophy is that it's cool to think about philosophy.
Well, I think it's more that it's an important part of human and personality development and culture and all of these things to consider different viewpoints and to explore the world and challenge yourself by thinking about things in different ways and listening to someone who's a cynic and understanding that there is value to these different viewpoints. And the reason why I don't think it's necessarily a problem that it doesn't commit to that element of its themes in terms of exploring them deeply is because I feel like it's one of the pillars that leads to human development sociology that I think are the core element of this movie.
And also, like, what does any film say about philosophy?
Yes, but that's my problem.
Okay.
Because that the sex in the movie is cool.
Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah.
Through
sex havers represent.
Yeah.
Through Bella's progression.
There's a reason there's a little border here on the video screen.
Oh, because Timo's the only one.
Yeah.
Who has had it?
Yeah.
We got
sex. That is
sex.
I think
intercourse.
I've heard of it. Through Bella Baxter's sexual encounters, she learns a lot that manifests in the line of dialogue with my boy Christopher Abbott, where she talks about how she doesn't want to be. What's the word for when you do the surgery that they want to do on Bella?
Lobotomized.
Lobotomized.
Yes. Well, no, they're not going to lobotomize her.
That's. I'm talking about when they're going to cut her
clitoris off.
I
don't know if there's circumcised. Is like
no.
female? No, that's like female circumcision though. I'm pretty sure.
It doesn't matter.
You sex havers really know your terms, guys.
Here's the point.
It's not one that I use a whole lot.
Yeah, Timo, we're very experienced with doing that.
Here's the point. It's important for Bella, and Bella learns a lot through that. I think part of the reason the film feels too long to me, and it feels like I don't get stuff out of every sequence of the movie, is that we get on the boat and the people she meets at the dining table, the cynic and the other woman that I forget, who is also very funny. She's
the old woman who masturbates.
Yeah, she's funny occasionally.
Occasionally.
I think they're both great, but they both just take Bella as something. Like, Bella's just normal to them.
Yeah.
And then they kind of like read books together, but they don't talk about what they read. And like, I don't feel like there's any resistance in that part of the narrative. And to me, the problem then becomes...
What do you mean by resistance?
Because in the brothel scene, there's a lot of this opposition to Bella.
Oh, sure.
Bella learns from that. There's something going on there. If a whole section of the film can be reduced down to it's cool to think about philosophy, then I think you've missed the point in making this a real learning experience for Bella. Where's the moment when she's either challenged on any of the things she's reading, or says or just has to report out anything she's reading? I feel like that's like
Jared Carmichael's character. I mean, he talks about how there isn't value to these things and how it's not he sees the world in such a pessimistic way, and she says no, there is a chance for people to develop and for us to make a change in the world.
Sure.
That's literally what you're talking about.
Yeah, but she doesn't I just feel like
I also think it's included in the Christopher Abbott sequence. He's sort of like he's the final boss of Poor Things.
Sure.
For all the intellectualizing and growth that Bella has, he's trying to like push her back to square one, which is again why Victorian England is such a great setting for this film, is because it was such a constrictive time for women in particular. And he's just like trying to take the mass canvas that Bella has become, philosophy included, and sort of just like corral her back into a nice controllable substance for himself.
No, I see what you're saying. I guess my problem is I can explain to you what Bella Baxter feels about sex and about women's autonomy.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what Bella Baxter thinks about philosophy.
Okay.
Well,
And again, maybe that's me, but
No,
I
no.
don't feel like we get enough, because I feel like the boat section also ends up just serving as an extension. Obviously, Duncan Wedderburn is in all three major parts of the film.
Mhm.
He even is the one that gets Christopher Abbott back in the fold.
Right.
Yeah.
But by the time we're in Paris, we're off of him. He's a bit character that
Mhm.
pops up,
Bella,
which is funny.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like on the boat, to me, I read that scene in a very reductive, or that sequence in a very reductive way. Of we're on the boat, Duncan Wedderburn is being a dickhead to an extent that he, even beyond what he was in Lisbon.
Right.
And Bella is just above it in reading and learning words.
Uh-huh.
And maybe, again, this is me as a dumb audience viewer.
Uh-huh.
And maybe it's that the film didn't communicate this well enough to me, or I didn't pay enough attention. Both are possible. But I just don't think that I know what Bella feels about philosophy.
Okay.
And I don't think that it's successful to just say that philosophy is cool to discuss,
Sure.
in my opinion.
That's fair. You know what? That's fair.
There's one pillar of the film I want to talk about.
Okay, here we
that
go.
didn't talk about, that I was going to ask the question about. Then I never remember when I was going to ask a question. I didn't ask a question.
Okay.
I want to talk about the cinematography of the film. So
Right.
I talked about the production design.
Right.
I do not really care for how the film looks a lot of the time.
Okay.
I think that, to me, the fisheye in particular is meaningless. Now,
Exactly.
that might be
I was pondering this out loud to myself. I was like,
Sure.
so many of these other things, but I can't figure out why we cut to the fisheye when we do. What does that shot mean? That shot is so different and so. What does it mean? I don't know. I want it
Let
to
me give an
mean
example.
something.
Mhm.
Yeah, let me give an example of another modern film that I feel is Yorgos mode, but it's not Yorgos.
Here we
It's
go.
The Card Counter by Paul Schrader.
Okay. All right.
There's a long sequence where we're in Abu Ghraib. Did I say it right?
I believe so.
Yes. And we're using heavy fisheye on, funnily enough, Willem Dafoe.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And that is an
Oscar Isaac, by the way, was apparently meant to, and they joked with Mark Ruffalo about how Oscar Isaac was always going to come in and take over the Duncan Weatherburn role.
Sure.
He would have also done a very good job.
Yeah.
I love Oscar Isaac. But in the context of The Card Counter, the fisheye is used very intentionally to basically show how fucked up the American military's treatment of people in Abu Ghraib was and is still. I don't know. That's a whole different.
Hopefully
point.
not.
Hopefully
Let's
was.
say that.
I think that fisheye, or there's a lot of shots that aren't fisheye. It's just like this tight iris in the
Mhm.
frame. I think that these things need to have more meaning, at least for me as a viewer, for it to not just be like kind of a weird thing that's
Sure.
happening that takes me out of the experience. Now, again, this could be either it's just for the point of style, or it's me missing something. And if
Mhm.
it's me missing something, I'm curious what you guys think the meaning is. But for me, I'm just like, okay, I feel like I'm constantly being taken out of the experience because we're constantly going fisheye, we're constantly going iris.
Yeah.
It just loses
if
me.
If there isn't meaning, what's the intended effect? I guess like with the color in black and white, I understand what the meaning is between that shift.
Mhm.
It's the discovery of sex. The world is fundamentally different in before and after that. But
Mhm.
what does these fisheyes and these vignette shots mean, other than being a Lanthimos trope? That is something that Lanthimos does in other of his films. It is kind of his style signature.
Well, the reason I would say that they are included, and I will note that especially for the fisheye, basically only included in the first section of the movie,
Right.
Yeah.
is to establish that this is odd. And of course that's very reductive, but that is a style of shot that is so rarely used in
Mhm.
modern cinema that including it puts you off kilter. You're like, that is weird. And it tricks your brain into thinking that even just a shot of a street, which is a couple times when the fisheye is used, and a relatively normal Victorian era street
Mhm.
is weirder, and there's something a little bit off. And so I think that Lanthimos uses those, again, primarily at the beginning of the film, to show that there's still some to learn and that we're still not quite comfortable with this world, and we don't quite understand what's going on because, again, those style shots disappear over the course of the movie as we learn more about Godwin Baxter's intentions and Bella Baxter as a character. The cinematography becomes less abrasive in terms of those shot compositions, and so I does that make sense?
My boring
Somewhat.
short answer is that I don't really notice them. Funnily enough,
that's fair
because
enough.
I think a lot of the film takes on.
Well, you see the world like that anyway, so it's just normal to a guy like
exactly.
you.
I have fish eyes.
That's just an eye shot.
Yeah, that's just normal. But I think a lot of the film takes on aesthetics of having a fisheye, even when it's not literally like a vignette style thing. Like I remember the shot of Mark Ruffalo kind of doing his like arms flailing out,
Such a
legs
good
flailing out dance. I was like, it's shot in a fashion where that looks fisheye-y.
Yeah.
So I think the whole film just kind of feels like that to me. So where I can't tell you a specific shot that was in fisheye, frankly. But I think Timo, you might have answered your own question a little bit earlier when, as Tucker mentioned, they're largely constrained to the beginning portion of the film. When this film is shot through the eyes of a toddler, and this is perhaps
And that's how toddlers see the
that's
world.
how toddlers see the world. I mean, can any of us deny that we saw the
I
world?
didn't see the world that way. so I don't know.
Well,
I don't remember how I
100%
saw the
accurately
world.
remember.
I gotta go watch Baby Geniuses and find out. if
No,
that's
yeah,
how it was.
exactly. But no, I think I mean, if you want an explanation from me, someone who that it doesn't really register is like, that's a fisheye shot. That's a fisheye shot. That's a vignette shot. Like that's an explanation I can give you. It's not exactly one that I'm going to sign off and subscribe to, but hey, I don't know. What do you want from me over here?
What do you want?
Tanner, I always subscribe. The
That's
backlot banter, that is,
Very
ladies and
good.
gentlemen.
I just want to shout out the score. Fucking love
Yeah,
the
I
score
love
of
the
this
score.
film.
I love the score.
The kick in when we do a hard cut to Bella and Duncan having sex for the first time. That's my favorite bit of the score. Maybe my favorite bit of score of the entire year,
Sure.
frankly. Of just that specific shot, and then like the harpsichord like it's going fucking off the chain. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm
but
loving
it's
this,
melodical.
man.
It's not
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I think that the thing that makes this score so fascinating to me is it's obviously choosing unconventional instruments
Yep.
and unconventional like time signatures and unconventional times when it shows up, because that first part of the movie doesn't have almost any music.
Yeah.
And except for like when it's like wandering around the halls and showing different shots of the Baxter estate,
Mhm.
and it's just like things are like happening, and the score is going crazy, and then it actually gets more normal as the movie goes on. And I think this actually can be quite paralleled nicely with the cinematography of things stabilizing as we understand the world better and Bella understands the world better. The score becomes less unexpected, and the cinematography becomes less unexpected. And I think that these are synergistic choices to just better explain the cohesion of how you should feel in these moments. Of course, that's very obvious, but I think they're such ridiculous choices that even when you might say like, oh, this fisheye lens shot on this street, why is that street in fisheye lens? It is the fisheye lens is contributing to the overall less cohesive, less traditional nature of that first sequence. It's not that specific shot in particular. It's that shot and that lens was used in this first part of the movie for this reason.
Do we want to wrap up here, folks? Are we about
I love
done?
rapping.
Okay. I do want to do one final thing and that is everyone just go around and say your favorite funny moment of Poor Things.
I want to go first because I'm going to get stolen if I don't go first.
Okay.
My favorite is the cheese to meet you joke.
Fromage que cheese to meet you.
And then that guy loses it.
He loves that joke.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Quick thing. I love Bella Baxter. I love Emma Stone's delivery of lines in this too. She has such a consistent and fun way of speaking. It's so good. So good.
Well, she doesn't have a consistent way of speaking because Bella is changing her cadence over the course of the movie.
I mean, her tone.
Sure.
Is very
Sure. Yeah.
As it is for a lot of people, actually.
Yeah.
I think for me,
Tucker, Timo?
I don't remember a ton of like of like I thought it was funny. I was really enjoying the lines as I watched it. But just a moment that I enjoyed was in the brothel section, and after Bella has devised her method to Oh, this is the cheese to meet. Is it not the cheese to meet you? No, it's whatever
Yeah,
joke.
that's when.
It's whatever joke she tells to the guy before.
Yeah,
the-
that's
Yes,
cheese
that's
to
cheese
meet
to
you.
meet you.
Okay, yeah. Well, I
That's
also
the only joke. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's great because it's you're gonna tell me a childhood memory.
Uh-huh.
He talks about getting covered in blood when he falls off his bike,
Yeah,
and then she says cheese to meet you, and then she smells him, and then then he fucks her.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
The progression I think encapsulates to me the eclectic spirit Poor Things.
and
really
and
well.
and that specific request that Bella makes in that scene of though, okay, this will be better if we do this. It's
Yeah.
it's such a characteristic thing. I mean, like, who else would think of that stuff? Who else
Yeah.
would make that be the requirements for your brothel? Bella Baxter would.
Yeah.
It's really perfect for the character, and that's why it stuck in my head.
Yeah, and then I'm glad that he took that one because you would have stolen it
That's right.
accidentally. You didn't even know you were stealing it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I
you
didn't
did it
even
later.
know
Yeah.
For me, it's most of the things that happen in the like high society restaurant that they go to.
Sure. Yeah.
I must go punch that baby. Great
Yep.
line.
Yep,
great
that's
great
really
moment. Why must I keep it in my mouth? This is revolting. That's a
Mhm.
great line. But it's really when shit
what
hits the
about,
fan.
What about when it's you can only say
It's
the
like,
three things?
Delighted. How marvelous and
I love
how do they
Lisbon.
get these pastries so
Yeah.
crisp?
And it's right after what she said, like my mom died or something.
Yeah.
Delightful.
Yeah. And then what really sells that entire sequence to me is when she's winking and she's like, oh, that guy over there is winking. And Duncan stands up and he goes over and he like jumps on this guy. And then the fisheye lens is like
Yeah,
bulging
yep,
things
yep.
out and like the perspective is weird. And then he's obviously just like a weak guy. So he's like hanging on the back of this guy and everyone's like, what the fuck is going on here? And then he goes and jumps on someone else. And then I was like, huh? It's like the comedic timing of that through the pacing, through the performances, through the cinematography. It's like everything is just like hitting beats there. I think it's phenomenal.
There's a couple Duncan lines that I would say, but I think if I gotta go with one, I think it's one that is also includes a like weirdly long comedic pause where Bella says something and then Duncan is at such a loss for words, and then like you can kind of see because Mark Ruffalo's face is just kind of at the corner of the frame. You kind of see him like he starts to pout and he's on the verge of crying. He just says, I'm gonna go to the casino.
Oh yeah, you laughed at that line so hard. I mean, Mark
Oh.
Ruffalo's facial acting in this is just like
Yeah.
comedic gold.
And then when he says like,
Shut
the fuck up.
He seems like he's
I will
having-
kick your fucking dog to death.
The casino line is especially funny because they probably hold on that shot for 6 or 7 seconds. before
Yeah,
anybody
just
says
complete
anything.
silence.
Yeah.
And Bella just looks like completely perplexed at what's going on with his face and why he's not saying anything.
And she doesn't understand why he would go to the casino.
Yeah.
What about when?
But us
What about when he
real
goes
ones on
downstairs to
other
the
end.
bar and slams his head down on the
Yeah.
counter and like sound design?
Like he's a microsecond away from doing it again when Bella comes up to him
Yeah.
and says something to him.
And then he does it a second
He
time
does
when
it
he's
a
talking
second
to him.
time,
God.
Okay.
Scores.
Scores.
Just
Are we doing final thoughts or are we just doing scores?
frankly, if I had the choice, I would have named this a Goofy movie.
Well, what about an extremely goofy movie?
I think it's even crazier
Here's
than that.
my
to be
feeling.
honest.
Yeah.
Like Jamal, I was tripping from the runtime
Uh-huh.
of Poor Things.
No, Jamal,
But
you be tripping.
You be tripping.
Yeah, that's right.
but I do find it one note, and I do think that for me, it doesn't have the stylistic or thematic meaning for me that it does for others. And so while Tucker pulls up the score sheet, you need to go to the other tab of the
Oh,
score sheet.
There you go, found it.
I think I'll just wrap up by saying that again, I have an appreciation for the craft of this film.
Absolutely.
But there is just something inherent, in my opinion, about how Bella moves through the world and how I feel like the humor and scenarios stay at a constant that just doesn't let me in the way that others are let in.
Yeah.
So just like how I thought Killing of a Sacred Deer is probably a good movie, maybe,
Uh-huh.
but I just don't like it. I just think I'm in a similar boat with Poor Things.
Sure.
Okay.
That's totally fair.
Anyone else have final closing thoughts?
Oh, well, maybe after we do some scores or something.
Oh,
not
sure.
the
That's a good
scores.
idea.
3, 2, 1,
3,
go.
2, 1. Bam. Look at all of us go. Wah, wah, wah. They loaded in a funny
That
way.
is
Yeah.
we have a wide range. Okay, starting from Mr. Spoiler himself. He told us what his score was going to be way back at the beginning of this review. Tucker gave it a 10.0.
Oh,
Tucker gave it a
Oh.
10.0. Followed by Tanner, also gave it a 10.0. 2 flat 10s on this one. Highest score a movie can
Mhm.
receive. I gave it
Yeah.
a 9.2.
this is the only one I'm going to give a 10.
Well, okay.
Okay.
This is the first of a couple that I'm going to give a 10. Spoiler.
Tanner really liked this year. And then
Uh-huh.
finally, Abram gave it a 5.7. So big departure there. Maybe we didn't let Abram speak enough to have that be the sentiment of the review.
Hey, he spoke plenty.
Okay.
Too much. I think.
I did. I think I communicated it.
Anyhow, the average is 8.7. So that's spot number 1, baby.
Number one.
Yeah, number one, the best. For those uninitiated, that's a My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 reference.
We're
Go
hitting
watch
all
it.
the great references here.
Yes. Poor Things, again, it's my favorite movie of the year. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It commits to everything that I find fascinating in a film, which is exploring humanity and very human, important themes through the ridiculous. And if you've ever thought a movie was ridiculous, it was Poor Things. This movie commits to it. It's every bit of its style, from its strange score and cinematography and production design, costume design and performances, but I think always manages to keep it grounded with exploring the important aspects of humanity through one of the most interesting characters I've ever seen put on screen.
Mhm.
This is the only one of these Best Picture nominees. It's not the only one I think is great. I think there's an amazing list of nominees. This is the only one, at least for the watches I've done so far, that has hit me in the way that more movies did last year, that my favorite movies do. This is an all-arounder, and if I ran the Academy this year, very few other movies would win awards. Because I think this is the best supporting performance of the year, best lead actress performance of the year,
Yeah.
director, picture, costume design. I actually think it's a very fun experiment for me to go do, is be like, what else would win? I mean, it could only win one screenplay, so there'd be another movie that's got a screenplay.
Right.
But I mean,
the other ones would just go to Elemental.
yeah.
Yeah.
Best animated.
Yeah.
Hey, that one for sure.
That one for sure. What I will say,
Because Migration wasn't nominated.
Yes. What I will say of Poor Things is it is a gorgeously crafted, so meticulously thought out and planned and beautifully executed film that also wraps so many ideas up into itself. It's a Frankenstein film. It's a movie about gods and their creation and usurping your creator. It's a movie about bodily autonomy. It's a movie about feminism. It's a movie about, taking down power structures,
Punching babies.
and punching babies. The babies being in charge of the power structures in question. No, I mean, and it looks like nothing else I've ever seen before. The score sounds like nothing else I've ever heard before.
Oh, you did say that actually when we saw the movie. That kind of sounds like Pikmin
But
music.
it is a singular film for me in a lot of regards that I have such a hard time figuring out whether this or some of the other films that we'll talk about in this series are my favorite film of the year. But it's definitely up there, and on a rewatch, it might have taken that spot. But I am reserving all that judgment until we get through all of the nominees once again.
I'll just say that you don't have the script book for Poor Things back.
That's true. I don't. I do not.
I see a bright flashback there. Some movies got a really bright flash in it.
That's true.
Elemental.
You guys said what I thought.
Okay.
You summed it up nicer than I could have, Tanner. But
You some bitches.
I do believe you do, Mr. Master of Schedule, Tanner, know what film we're going to be watching next.
That's right. We're going to fast forward a little bit in the timeline of the grand scheme of humanity and take a little trip to New England for The Holdovers. Is the next film that we'll be talking about.
I thought you were going to say Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom.
No,
because
no.
it takes place in Maine.
Well, it also takes place in Necrum or whatever.
I wouldn't know because I didn't watch it.
Anyway, yes, we'll be talking about The Holdovers next. So if you want to rewatch that, get some fresh thoughts on it, like we will be, go ahead and do so. It's a wonderful film.
Yeah,
it's on Peacock.
And everyone has
true?
that.
Yes.
I have Peacock. No.
Guess whose local theater is still playing it?
Really? That's
Yeah,
cool.
I'm gonna
Nice.
go. I'm gonna go see it in theater on Friday morning. So
very cool.
Have you seen it, Timo?
I actually haven't, so it'll be my first watch.
Oh, awesome!
It's
nice.
one of the couple of films of this year. This one I watched for the first time. Holdovers I'll have watched for the first time. But I'm like 7 out of 10 already seen.
Gotcha.
Sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for a very enlightening discussion on a very fun film. I think this film is actually very approachable. This is an approachable Lanthimos film, which is not the case for other.
One of his more approachable
I
films.
wouldn't
I
call
will
this
say.
an approachable film.
Maybe the favorite. The favorite's pretty approachable.
Given that
too.
I stopped watching The Lobster, I turned it off.
That's
I was not going to finish that movie, but this movie I was
Okay,
excited
okay.
to finish.
Yeah.
That's my final thoughts. Thanks for the discussion, guys. We'll be back next time. Keep it tuned right here on Backlot Banter for our discussion of The Holdovers and all the other Best Picture nominees, as well as more Oscar content, because it's the best time of the year for us here. We love this. It's
Christmas
so-
season's 10 weeks long.
It's true.
Oh,
It is.
so cool.
6 weeks.
10 movies long.
10 movies, 6 weeks. Oh yeah, that's true. We'll be doubling up here at the beginning of Oscar season.
Mhm.
So just take it easy on ourselves later.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it'll be hot and heavy nonetheless.
Yep. Hot and heavy. Okay. Until next time, you know what I always say. Stay warm, keep cool. Peace. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And be behaved, blast you, but you're fucking
Behave.
poor things.
Behave. Oh.
We are both faker.
Oh.
Oh,
behave.
behave.
That's my favorite meme ever.